Adrian. How you
Hey
doing?
Rosie, good to see you.
Good. So we're doing this as part of the Society is Greater Than Tech initiative with WiredSussex and University of Sussex, which is also part of the Science Policy Research Unit. And we're both like big into grassroots movements and innovation and community. So between the two of us, we're going to like spend the next 20, 30 minutes talking about what that means to me and to you. We both, I guess, come from very different backgrounds. Just as an introduction to myself, I'm Rosie Sherry. I've been in tech for about 20 years now, originally as a software tester, and increasingly, like over the years, I've just become very much focused on community building as my focus. I built up Ministry of Testing, which is a community of software testers. And the idea around that was to kind of advance the community for testers and to create what I believed was needed, which was very much focused around community and education. So that's been going on for 13 years now. And that was very much grassroots, I guess, in my perspective, but more from like a community and tech perspective, in the fact that I started it just myself and I managed to grow it through community and almost managed to change an entire industry over the years without really, really imagining that. So, I guess that's kind of cool. Yeah, these days, for a couple of years, I've been running the Indie Hackers community, which is owned by Stripe, kind of like a big tech company in the US. That's interesting from this perspective because indie hackers are basically kind of like independent founders who are trying to innovate very much in a grassroots way as well. So they try to innovate through business and through tech, and they're trying to find their own kind of independent ways of solving problems and starting businesses that kind of matter to them. So yeah, that's kind of me. And I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, Rosie, no, thanks. Yeah, we do come at this from different vantage points, and my interest in grassroots innovation began actually probably around the time when you were starting Ministry of Testing, 13 or so years ago, when with a colleague, Jill Seafang, we were researching, or we were interested in a lot of local environmentalism and local environmental activities and groups of neighbours or local activists and residents and social entrepreneurs, and who were trying to come up with, develop social sustainable development projects. And we thought what they were doing was really innovative. Often that may be setting up, a food growing initiative or community energy or some housing initiative where, the environment's really at the center of it, and the community as well. And so we began trying to think about these activities and try and learn from them as innovation processes, if you like, as really, really generative of important innovations for changing societies and making them more sustainable. Because often when you think about innovation, you think, I don't know, for me then and still now, really, you think of, I don't know, research laboratories and firms investing money and big government programs trying to invest in technologies, or some of these now multinational corporations developing technologies and marketing them in ways that do change our lives for good in some cases, but sometimes perhaps for the worse as well. It's usually quite ambivalent. And so basically what we, as researchers, study and learn about innovation in these more industrial and commercial settings doesn't really work so much in trying to understand what's going on in grassroots innovation settings. So that's how I got interested in this topic. And then over the years, I've worked on various projects looking at different kind of grassroots innovation initiatives or movements. So yeah, and that's what's brought us together. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I guess from my perspective is like, I like to combine the aspect of business and community and innovation, but trying to do it in my own way in I guess, a more creative way or flipped model kind of way. So like, I kind of make things up as I go along, and that's kind of like my way of innovating. Is I try to study like the communities that I'm a part of, and I try to look at the problems. And I love business because in the fact that if I believe like in being like a good business and being an ethical business and trying to make the right decisions. I don't necessarily love business because it makes money, but at the same time, it's like I'm very aware that businesses need to make money, and actually, if you can make money, that then becomes very powerful. So, like, if we flip that to like non-business focus, where a lot of grassroots innovations, you know, they rely on funding, or they rely on research, or they rely on government to make progress. That to me is like really like frustrating place to be, like something that I can't personally handle. So it's like, for me, it's like over the years, I've just kind of made up my own way of dealing with that and thinking, well, I want to make change. I can make change. I love tech. I love business. How can I make change? And all of that has basically come down to like community, working with people, finding people who like believe in what I'm doing, and just like figuring stuff out and making money along the way and changing lives along the way, employing people, making a profit. But you know, all along the way, for me, it's like a ministry of testing. It's, you know, I class it as an ethical business. We don't like necessarily shout about it, but we're very much about, you know, employing good practices, you know, trying to our best to be sustainable, employing people fairly, and, you know, all of those kind of things are like very top agenda. I've never like overpaid myself. I've always, even like when there was profit in the company, I never kind of like just took money out, because I always felt it was more important to keep the company going just in case. And that turned out to be very useful during the pandemic, when like it had a huge drop in revenue. Those savings, you know, saved the company to a certain extent. So like, yeah, ethics with business is like super important to me, especially I guess with big tech and how you know that naturally influences things. Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, well, no, I think that it sounds to Rosie then that that's about sort of autonomy and be able to sustain and do your tech activities in ways that you value. Is that the, you know, so that and the way to do that is to find that, you know, a sort of value that can be turned into revenues and a business model that works in the ways that you're comfortable with. And I think certainly with some of the networks, organizations and movements we've studied, or specific initiatives, getting a kind of sustainable model, like a, you know, business model or a resource model that makes the initiative viable, and you're not just, you know, because often some of these is the kind of holy grail a bit, but sometimes the things they're trying to achieve don't lend themselves readily to creating a business in those sorts of ways, or it's hard work to find them. You know, if you're really trying to cut an initiative that drastically cuts carbon emissions, or, you know, it's practicing quite labor-intensive forms of food production, but nevertheless, you know, without artificial inputs and less contaminating or healthier, those labor costs under the current way that, you know, society values things and the way economics works can make it really difficult to find a viable business model. And so then what's been interesting with some of those initiatives, so then sometimes they rely then on just people's voluntary effort and just going much further and working incredibly hard. But other times it's reaching out to others who are trying to achieve similar things and beginning to kind of try and lobby and almost like launch sort of political, with a small p, if you like, campaigns and social movements to try and change the rules of the game, if you like, to not flip the business model, but almost like flip the economic context so that you can develop, you know, even more transformative businesses.
Yeah.
It's not easy, you know, by any stretch, but I guess, but bearing that in mind, I wonder if with, you know, the communities you work with and help build, if there's any discussion or recognition of, you know, I don't know, if there were certain changes in policy or politics or in society, you know, we could do even more, you know, if you like, it's that, if there are any kinds of limitations or constraints that you nevertheless have to
I mean, it's
deal with in some
yeah.
way. Yeah,
it's a tough one, because I don't think there's like any right answers or wrong answers, and certainly like a lot of the grassroots social movements are very powerful. But you know, I think it's also like where you find personal energy, where you find like you can add value, which becomes hard. So like with social movements, it's very much like a labor of love, and you know, often it doesn't pay financially. And when we live in a world that's like so financially driven, where the cost of housing is expensive, and it's hard to like justify spending time or finding the time to participate in these movements, because it's like, you know, it's a labor of love, and you have priorities, you have kids to feed, you have the mortgage to pay, or the rent to pay. It becomes very hard to justify spending any time. And I think like,
then, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting, because I guess that's the only reason I cut across you there, Rosie, was just because I thought it was a good example of how you could think of policies or initiatives that would give people time and allow them to test things, prototype, develop projects, and actually preceding all of that, just meet other people and have conversations and say, I'm into this, I do these skills, you know, I'm a biologist, I do this, you know, so well, I'm a coder, I know, I'm really into Python or whatever, yeah, and then someone else is an artist. And there are local authorities around the world that provide facilities. I mean, WiredSussex to a degree is all about that as well. Yeah. And then initiate these things. But also, you know, you could think of a government providing sabbaticals for technologists to take some time out and to do something, you know, in a less instrumental, less narrow way, to be a bit more explorative. And that's what was quite interesting in some of our research, is how there's no right or wrong answer. You also said that a moment ago, and that, I thought that was really interesting. That really resonated, if you like, because some of the initiatives we sort of study or we work with make mistakes, things don't work out, there's a lot of testing. But because it's often what's sometimes, because of the scarcity of time, energy, resources, sometimes the lessons from that don't get documented or don't get circulated to others, if you like. So part of the challenge is to try and learn from these initiatives and circulate, and if you like, create facilities where people can meet and share. And all of that could be part of innovation policy in society. You know, we could lobby and argue for local authorities to set up institutions and spaces and provide resources and sabbaticals, and some of the and that's precisely what happened in some of the innovation movements we studied, we write about in the book that's sort of part of this series. They did that because they mobilized collectively. I mean, but it's really challenging. I mean, maybe the trick here is, how do you break this vicious cycle that you've talked about? You know, it's just really difficult to find time to do these things. So I tend to focus in on doing what I can do and achieving great things with that. Yeah. But I don't know. That's for me the kind of
I think
big
part
question
of it
here.
Yeah, I think part of it for me is, well, you could actually solve a lot of that through business. It doesn't have to be through government. I'm not saying it has to be through business. It's like, you know, why can't we find a balance? And why can't we educate people and business owners that actually, instead of like wasting money, there's a lot of waste in businesses and government. Everywhere we go, there's lots of waste, right? There's a lot of things in business that people feel like they need to have and they don't actually need. So it's like, I almost think there's a huge opportunity for like a new wave of businesses to appear, to be good businesses, but also serve the needs of communities. Like they can make money in some ways, but they can also give away a lot and support people. And if they have budget, they can, you know, we could like almost normalize the idea that, well, if you have extra profits, why not hire someone to do something amazing?
Yeah. But it's, I mean, but are there bad businesses as well? And, you know, there are, and I meet people who, you know, work in businesses or starting business, you know, I don't know, like say renewable energy or food, housing, you know, even in manufacturing, and they do fantastic things, but sometimes it's despite the competition, but, you know, there are always competitors that can undercut or that don't care about these things beyond the bottom line. And so if you're in a competitive environment where there's enough businesses that aren't really interested in sustainability or being ethical, then it makes your position harder. Now, sometimes I think you can make that a selling point, yeah, that you're an ethical business, and some people would be prepared to buy things from you or contract, you know, that business.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking, I'm kind of pulling it. It comes, for me, it comes back to this, the rules of the game, if you like. I mean, you know, in the 1980s, the emissions that British factories, you know, the contamination that British factories put up into the air or down in the sewers or into the rivers was trade secrets, was secret, it was not publicly accessible. And it took environmentalists, local environmentalists, and the movement to lobby for changes in the law to get companies to make that data public. And they began gathering the data. And it was really interesting. It made it easier for the companies that wanted to be greener, you know, it was fairer on them, if you like, because the resistance companies now had to implement them sorts of operations as well. All of them learned that, you know, they were wasting loads of stuff. You were talking about waste. And so, I don't know. I'm
just picking up on your rules of the game comment, and that kind of stuck with me. And I'm like, well, we're changing the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Like everything right now is, especially with COVID, everything is up for grabs. So like, you know, very typical example, like as a woman in tech, to get a job 15 years ago, for me was like really, really hard. To work remotely 2 years ago, I've been working remotely for a long time, but generally to work remotely, people would reject it, saying, oh, it's not possible. It's not possible. And then COVID happens and all of a sudden everybody is remote. Yeah. So it's like, you almost have to question everything that exists. And that's what I try to do. Obviously it's hard and it's probably impossible because there's biases everywhere. But I think like as a society, we can do much more than we think we can. You know, so a year ago, no one would go remote, but now like remote is like completely normalized. And that makes me think that, well, why couldn't we do this 10 years ago or 5 years ago to support people like me, mothers, or people who find it hard to get out, or people with disabilities? Why couldn't we do that? You know, and you know, there's obviously lots of reasons behind it, but to me that just shows we can do stuff, and we should do stuff, and we should fight more for things, and we should start like or stop looking for excuses that we can't do things and just start doing them, and to like empower ourselves to do them. And like everything that I've done is just I get off my own back and I just do it. I don't seek permission. I just do stuff and I look for change. And I've done all right from it. You know, I've built a business, I've built a career, I've 0 qualifications, but I have this belief in me that we can change. And I personally, I want more people to have that belief, and I want to take that belief and take like my love and my passion, whatever you want to call it, of community, and change the world through that. and through with business as well, because for me, I enjoy that aspect a lot more. You know, I just personally, you know, for me, I enjoy that aspect. And maybe to set an example for other businesses, that we can create new types of businesses, we can operate differently, we can choose to spend the money in different ways. But yeah.
And have there been things you've done then, Rosie, where, you know, you're pushing against the rules, if you like, or you're trying to ignore them and like, well, I'm just going to do this anyway. But it sounds like you do that, the way what you were saying then, that in a really smart way, you know, thinking about how I could do it. You know, it takes a lot of work, but sorry, what am I getting at here? I wonder if there's been things you've done that haven't proven viable, or you've not been able to take as far as you've wanted to, because the things that need to change just aren't quite falling into place yet. I mean, you know, it sounds like the fact that you were,
I mean,
go on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've had some successes. There's a lot of things I'd still like to do. There's a lot of, you know, I've failed as well. And you know, it's like, it's like no answer, right? I guess no set answer. I just think, like, I guess personally, it's like you have to be willing to try and to fail. And like with Ministry of Testing, I did that for 3 years, just like as a side project kind of thing, before it made any money. But I was willing to like just like do it because I enjoyed it. I was learning stuff. That's kind of like my way of learning, is I'll just go and do stuff instead of going and getting a qualification. I'll just go and build something. But it's still valid learning, right? And I think like as a society, we don't, you know, there's like almost shame in not having like a qualification. So, and that for me is like, it's a bit of a trigger for me, because like, I don't have any qualifications, but that doesn't make me any less, right? But I've lived my whole 20-year career with that at the back of my mind. It's like, am I good enough? You know, will if I apply for a job, will people see that, you know, I don't have any qualifications, and what will they say?
Yeah.
But the reality is that it never really impacted me that much. But, you know, all of that is just like, I just think like as a society is that we don't believe in people enough. And it's all like pushing people down this certain pathway. And I guess I want to set like more examples of showing people that you can do things in different ways, and you don't have to follow the pathways. And like, I guess the more I get my view and my story and my experiences out there, the more I can show people. And I guess hopefully, you know, even if it's just like a handful of people, if they go and create something special, even if it's just their own little world, their own small community, their own group of people, if that makes a positive impact, that's for me like how grassroots innovation starts. It always starts with a small group. You don't see it grow over time, and then like in business they say, oh, it's an overnight success. Like they'll say that for Ministry of Testing, and they'll say, no, it's not. It's been going for 13 years. But people will come across it now and think, oh, you've done so well with that. And they say, of course I've done well. I've like not taken my mind off of it for the past 13 years.
And is that typical? Because I mean, one criticism when we think about sustainable development, and I agree, I think there's usually a lot of effort and time that's invisible that precedes initiatives and so forth. And because it doesn't get that recognition, it tends not to get supported or valued as much as well. I mean, is that something you've...
Yeah, I mean, definitely like community and like metrics and measurement, like especially in business, there's all the rage for community at the moment since like COVID started. It's just like there's this huge boom in community stuff in the tech world, and they all like to measure stuff with metrics, like how many people visiting, how many conversations are happening, but actually what's most important are the connections that have been made and the conversations that have been had. It's not how many conversations, it's like what those conversations are about and what those conversations end up meaning to the people who are having them. And I think conversations are probably like the root, not strictly just conversations, but just like coming together and communicating. Conversations tends to be like the most popular way, but conversations is like the start of everything, right? The more we talk, the more we trust each other, the more relationships we can have, the more we can get past the small talk and talk about like meaningful things. And then once you get to that stage, it's like that's where change starts happening.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes months, it takes years, and most businesses or governments aren't willing to, invest in that. And I think that's a shame, because it's that whole like snowball effect. It's like if you do it for a while and you're working on the right thing, it will have that small snowball effect. And the snowball effect is everywhere, right? You invest, it's an investing, right? Anyone who invests will tell you about the snowball effect. Anyone who saves money will, tell you about that. It's like, but when it comes to community or grassroots stuff, people tend to want solutions straight away. And it's just, it's sad, but it's an opportunity as well.
Well, I think it's important. Well, you said how important it is to talk about things, and I think it's really important to talk about that. And how we've seen that out in some of our research sometimes is if policymakers, like say local authorities or public innovation programs or agencies that want to promote entrepreneurship and so forth, if they see, I don't know, a community energy initiative, this is fantastic. We want to replicate this. We want to take this from place A and we want to see it happening in places C, D, J, I, and they'll try and develop a model or almost turn it into like a product and try and diffuse it that way. And that can work if there's like a market or if there's a good business case for it. But some of the grassroots innovations we've looked at, because they're particularly challenging, they're embedded in, it's the community that's carrying it. And it's all of those things you were just talking about, building relationships, having conversations, really seeing the value in what you're doing, that kind of sustain you through all of those setbacks and efforts, and if you like. And so in the policy realm, when people talk about, we want to promote inclusive innovation or something like that, often it's just seeing about how to spread these accessible technologies or they're sort of inclusive in a quite standardized way. Whereas I think what our research has been pointing to is what might be more fruitful is actually going down to the first step. What you were talking about is actually how do you build capabilities and how do you enable communities to form and people to learn how, start interacting and working with one another. And you need to try and spread that really, rather than the specific, product or specific innovation itself. But it's a tough one to sell, especially in the UK, after a decade of massive cuts to local authorities and everyone not really having much resources to put into things, which weirdly is when you see a lot of much more mutual help and all sorts of grassroots stuff happening out of necessity, as well as out of idealism. When times are hard as well, we turn to one another for support and ideas.
I definitely think there's like a way out through education and through community and helping people. I think people don't realize that they can like make a living out of doing things that they love. But, I speak to so many people who would love to like do stuff they love and make a living, or, maybe find a bit of a balance that, do something better than like the day job that they might have and make a living kind of thing. And just with like the tech that's available now, and I see people like in indie hackers all the time making like really good living, like creating something valuable, and I think that's going to be a trend. I think more people will be working for themselves. They'll find ways to make money. They'll find ways to make a living, and hopefully that will lead to lots of positive things. And hopefully the tech will get better. The tech is still a bit hard. It's not like super straightforward, but there's definitely like a lot of tools out there that make it easy. But again, you know, like, as with all these things, it's like people go into this kind of stuff wanting to make a living straight away. And again, it's, you know, it's a snowball effect. It's like you got to start and then expect maybe in 3 years to be making a living on your own. So it's, you know, and most people aren't willing or able or knowledgeable to be able to do that. So, you know, that's I guess that part excites me, is like giving more freedom to people. How can we do that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's. I mean, for me, I mean, in addition to people like yourself just getting on and doing it, I think we have to, you know, you have to rethink about things, how you train and invest in people, and how you provide infrastructure and facilities for people to test out their ideas, and how we invest in them. And especially if we're thinking about addressing things like inequalities in society and environmental impacts of society, things that don't, for all the good businesses out there, there's still too many that aren't really trying to work for those things. So, you know, what kind of measures can be taken as a society to address that and tackle it? And I think the first important measure that comes out from us is just learning to listen to grassroots initiatives. Would be, you know, one, not the only one, you know, there's other ways of going about this, but would be a good place to start, perhaps. Yeah, definitely.
I don't think we get heard enough. People don't get heard, and like, yeah, it's hard, right?
Yeah, well, maybe I don't know. Let's see how many people watch this, but maybe WiredSussex is helping, perhaps, and let's hope there's more opportunities to have conversations like this in the future as well. Yeah,
exactly, and that's why, you know, I like doing these kind of things. I think it's important to kind of step up a bit when we can, and just like share ideas and share experiences, and hopefully, you know, it will, you know, propel someone or some people to, you know, make change or do something different.
I hope you're right. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie.